make my picture of me small. Facebook open in new window. Don't worry, I'm gonna drink tea shortly. Guys, just cool it. I gotta set this up. I gotta minimize that thing that just popped up. You are minimized. Then I gotta click Adam Quiney's stupid profile. And I gotta make sure he's live, and it's live now. So I'll click this just now, and it's, oh, nice. It's to the public, which is always a nice touch. And I've got sound. Okay, great. I think it's all, oh, I should check my sound. Don't worry, I'm gonna drink tea. Great, it's working. I often start these now and forget to turn on the sound or forget to make it public, and I feel like a royal dingus, which is not my commitment. That's not the highest commitment I'm up for. My commitment at this moment is to pour tea from this device into this device. Let's do it, people. It's happening. Whoa, long pour. Look at that. All over my keyboard if I'm not careful. Okay, that's enough pouring of the tea. We'll just let that sit there. I unsteeped my tea early today because I wanted to get here and start on time for y'all at this very late, very sexy live show we're going to be doing. My shirt will stay on, but you have to ask yourself, is Adam wearing pants? The answer is yes, but you do have to ask yourself that. Even though you know the answer, you must ask yourself that. Check out this piece of art that I have in my room. I like this. It's just a giant wooden globe. It's a ball of wood. Isn't that cool? It's like a palantir. Like I could do this and then like feel Sauron. Oh yeah, there he is. That just sits on a desk over here. Doesn't do anything. It just looks like a really beautiful chunk of polished wood. I like that. Big wood fan here as far as things go. Who the heck are these people? Let me know right there. Say, yo, this is this person. Drop your name. Less people present in this moment, probably because we're starting later. It's a sexier show, and some people they just don't want to do that. Oh, hey, LA. Nice to have you with us. Where are you living now, LA? Last time I checked, you had gone to Alberta, but now I think you're back here in Victoria. Is that right? Let me know. And good morning for 9 more minutes here on the West Fresh Coast. We're doing this live late because I was attending a focus group for the coach training program that I graduated from and then led for about 5 years. I called it Coach Training and Leadership Development Program because that's what it is. And so what Accomplishment Coaching is doing is rebranding. And hey, Mara, nice to have you with us. Hey, Tommy. They're going through all of this stuff and just asking questions about how they are perceived. What do they think is the most courageous thing for us to take? All of this sort of stuff. So it's very cool, neat to get to participate in that because I very dearly love their work and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to give back in whatever ways I can. Always. Oh, welcome back to Victoria. Nice to have you back. Good city to be back in. I always find that Victoria is a city that welcomes you back really beautifully. Every time we'd step off the plane on the tarmac of the airport, there'd be like the freshness of the air and the smell of pines and ocean and the stuff that makes that place you live uniquely yours. And so Victoria, we'd always come home from being somewhere hot or somewhere busy like a big city and just come here and be like, oh, yeah, this is home. We like home. Home is good. So thanks for being here. We're going to look at all of this stuff and talk about it. I've got some cool topics sourced by some of my peeps. Thank you, Andrew, Sachko, David, and Sharafat for your suggestions. And I've got a few others here that I'm going to speak to. So with the spectrums of being, one of the things that happened was I wrote all of the extended write-ups. So these are for like qualities of being like brilliance or wisdom or generosity or spirit, whatever it happens to be. They were originally about 3 pages in length. They're probably now 6 to 8. So a lot more there on each, like the gift, the possibility, the predictability, but then also there's sections on how do you work with this sort of quality? How do you lead someone whose primary quality or one of their primary qualities is generosity? What do you need to look for? What are the pitfalls you'll probably fall into in trying to lead this person? And then we've also got practices. Hey, Sachko, thanks for coming for the first 5 minutes. And Tommy, you're quite welcome. Victoria does most of that work for me. And we've got like the typical breakthrough path. So all of that stuff I rewrote. And then as I finished that, I started to think, well, there's a bunch of um, there's a bunch of practices that I reference throughout here. I think I want to include this section in the book that's more like, here's some ways to practice with this stuff. Like we talk over here for power, that there's a benefit in learning to work with your anger. But I didn't actually mention specifically how you do that because I didn't want to make that specific to that section. And then you'd have to, if you're someone else doing something else somewhere else, didn't make too much sense. You wouldn't think to go look in the section on power. So anyhow, what happened is I started writing a section just on practices. And as I did this, I found out, oh, there's a lot of stuff I have to say. And so, that started by the first thing I began writing was like, well, if I'm going to write out some practices, I need to distinguish the idea of practicing versus getting done. How are those two different? And I'll share very briefly, there's a much more robust write-up in this book, but most of what we relate to in life is something we just need to get done. In fact, that's a lot of how we relate to most of the problems, most of the stuff that shows up in our life that causes friction for us. We're like, if I can just get this done, if I can get this handled, if I can get this problem solved, then I can go back to how life is meant to be, or I can be in life as normal or whatever. And so it'd be like, when you're in a relationship with someone crappy, you're like, the thing I just need to do is dump them, and then life will be fine. Then I can not make the same mistake again, and then I'll be wherever I am. So that's typically how we relate to most of the stuff that we're up against in life, most of what shows up. Hey, Andrew, thanks for being with us, and I appreciate compliment on these colors. I have a nasty pimple right there on the back of my neck, and every time I did that with my collar, it's really painful. Oh, not a fan of these pimples. So getting things done, and then the art of practicing is the art of taking something on without the intention of like finishing it. It's not about checking something off a checklist. It's literally an ongoing practice. So if I were to give someone the practice, go and notice the ways that you give your power away, then the way people will typically take on that practice is they'll be like, okay, I got one more thing on my to-do list. Where do I give my power away? What are some places? Okay, when I'm going for lunch, I step aside to let someone else have the last chicken McNugget. Okay, I'll write that down. There, I did it. Okay, I've done that practice. I can tell Adam I did it. That's going to provide very little opportunity for growth because the awareness they're creating is almost none at all. In fact, what they're doing is they're looking in the areas in which they already know they are doing something to try to discover something new, which would be like if you told me to go discover a river or go and discover places where carpet are. And I was like, well, I know there's some in my office. Oh, I discovered carpet. Great. I've resolved. I've done the practice. Now, coach, what do I get next? And that completely, it diminishes all the power. It takes away our ability to discover anything. And so we want to distinguish that from this idea of a practice, which is you'll never finish your practice. You're just going to take it on for the week. But you may discover, like in the moment, oh my God, I'm giving my power away here. But that the next moment, you may discover a whole new place that you're giving away your power, and so on and so forth. So I started to distinguish that. And then, as you can imagine, it just kept going from there. And I was like, oh, wow. And so where we ended up was about 37 pages of distinctions and stuff like this. This is actually like not even a chapter, more like a section of the book now, which is sort of like the introduction, the conceptual model. What even is this? How does this compare to other models? Second is sort of like, how do you practice with this? How do you work with this? What are some stuff? And then finally, the actual qualities of being themselves, and the opportunity to see yourself and all of that in it. I'm talking about all this for two reasons. The first is I'm going to read a little bit today. I'm going to read about this section I've written on being with something as opposed to suppressing it and wallowing it. That's where we're going to start today. And to let you know, and I'll say this again at the end, but if you'd like this section for free, let me know. So you just have to email me or send me a message and say, hey, can I have that? And I'll just send you, I've got it in a PDF format that you can just read if you want. If you're kind of like, I want an advanced read through of this thing Adam's created. I think it provides a lot to coaches and leaders because it gives us ways beyond the shallow, obvious fixes that we tend to bring into our lives. The obvious fix in relationship would be like, the person I'm with is upsetting me, so I will leave them. And that will solve my problem. I don't have enough money right now, so what I just need to do is get a new job, and then I'll have enough money, right? These solve the problem presenting on the surface, but they don't actually create the breakthrough underneath that would have that problem stop ever showing up in your life at all. That's what a breakthrough is like. That thing no longer ever shows up. Get the client versus cultivate relationships. Getting client equals get it done versus the practice of outreach. Yeah, nice. I like how you brought that, Mara, into this sort of idea of client creation, how we build that. And congrats, Mara, on the recent success in your client practice. That's really cool. So I'm going to read a little bit from this chapter. I'm probably not going to read the whole thing because I think that would be boring, but I'm going to try to summarize a little bit. And so the first where we start here is the section's called being with something versus suppressing it or wallowing in it or reacting to it. So a lot of transformational work is your ability, it's developing your ability to be with something rather than to avoid it. So I'm just going to read what we've got here, which is many practices in this book. Let me bring this here so it doesn't look like I'm looking away from you. Many practices in this book speak to being with something. You can be with anything. You can be with someone's discomfort or sadness or anger. You can be with your own discomfort, sadness, or anger. You can practice being with your fear or the rage that someone feels while in traffic. You can be with a conversation about politics, the lack of money in your bank account, or the fact that someone has done something you believe is wrong. The practice of being with something is actually incredibly simple. Like most of these practices, the challenge is less the practice itself and more about what we put in the way of it. Being with is the simple act of sitting and being with something without needing it to change, without needing anyone or anything to be different, and without doing anything to avoid having to be with it. Being with. And so then we start to get into some of the ways we can avoid being with something. How do we avoid being with something? You can probably already imagine the most easiest one is just leave physically, right? Just get out of there. So I've got that listed here, avoiding it physically. Rather than simply being with something, a common solution is to avoid it altogether. Often we avoid things physically. So if you have a hard time being with negativity, you cut out negative people in your life. People having bad days? No, thank you. Physically, you avoid people that show up a particular kind of way. Whatever it is that there is there for you to practice being with, typically you will, instead of seeing this as your opportunity for transformation, you'll arrange your life so as to avoid having to be with those people. And at the same time, your own tendency to do these same things will remain in your blind spot. Because the second way we avoid being with something is we avoid being with it mentally. So perhaps you cannot be with conversations about politics. You're like, politics are stupid and I hate talking about them and it's all dumb. So that would be an example of something you cannot be with. And so maybe when one of the conversations at dinner shows up to be about politics and you're at the dinner table, you're not just going to get up and leave. And so instead, what you would do is you remain physically present, but check out mentally. Otherwise, occupying yourself with your own thoughts, tuning out the conversation. Sort of like staying present, but actually not physically present, but not being emotionally or mentally present whatsoever. You're checked out. So that's how our blind spots operate, is that because we judge someone else so harshly, we can't be with this pattern of behavior. And consequently, when we do it, we have no capacity to see it. We avoid being with it altogether. We also, when we do finally see it, we judge ourselves for it, or we justify, like when someone reflects it to us, instead of being like, oh, thanks for the reflection, I can really see that, fuck. We explain why what they've just reflected to us is actually not the case. We make exceptions for it. We rationalize it. Oh, I can see why you might feel it's that way, but it's actually not that way. And here's actually the thing, instead of just being with the reflection. So we can avoid it physically, we can avoid it mentally. We can try to fix or change it. I'm going to read what I've written here. This is one of the most common approaches that has us avoid being with something or someone. As a simple example, imagine someone sitting down beside you having a crappy day, and you try to help them by reframing their situation and having them see the silver lining. Wow, how nice of you. rather than simply being with this person having a crappy day, meaning you just sit there and they're like, yeah, my day sucks. And you're just like, yeah, I get it, and not changing that, not needing that to be different. Rather than simply being with them having a crappy day, you are attempting to fix their perspective so that they have a different experience. And this allows you to avoid being with someone's crappy day, their negativity, or whatever else it is that you are unable to be with. And the reason we would try to fix someone else having a particular experience is because that's what we do with ourselves. So you've probably noticed this if you've ever been around people that, I love this one, they complain a lot about people's negativity. I have this friend who, off and on for a while, I used to play squash with them, and hey, Mia, and I would, he'd want to meet with me, and he loved my work and wanted to have a conversation about working together, and that kind of petered out, which is totally fine. Um, but he would spend a lot of time when we'd go meet lunch or whatever, complaining about the negativity of other people. So he couldn't be with their negativity. And the reason he couldn't be with their negativity was he couldn't be with his own negativity. And so anytime he felt even the hint of negativity, he had to like find the positive silver lining, find the cheer up, lads, it's going to be okay. And what that does is it means there's this thing around which you can never kind of come to terms with. You can never, holy fuck, I'm negative. Now, what do I want to do about that? He didn't even have the room to consider that possibility. And if you don't have any room in your being to consider a particular possibility, you are at its mercy, right? If I can't admit that I have lost the match or that this product I'm making will not work, then I'm doomed to continue throwing more and more energy, funds, investing more of myself, and I'll never be able to get to the point where I can see it's not going to work, which would then set me free. Because then I could say, given that it's not going to work, what needs to change? If you've ever watched Bullet Ball, if that rings a bell, then you know what I'm talking about. Bullet Ball was this game a guy had invented, and he appeared on, it was either Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. I can't remember which. You can Google Bullet Ball. And the way Bullet Ball works is he created this game. He had a table, and then you put your hand. It's a stylized table. It's got like a little goal, I guess, or I can't remember exactly. You put your hand here, and then you shove a ball back and forth, and it's basically air hockey is what he's created. And this man was convinced that this was the game that was going to revolutionize games. And he came on Shark Tank. I'll say it's Shark Tank, but I'm not sure which one of the two it was. And he was telling people like this sad story about his invention, which was like, hey, Evan, um, by the way, I just want to say, Mara, I love the greeting you gave Mia there. Like, it warms my heart to see that kind of connection in the comments. So thanks everyone for like just being with each other and letting us have sort of a communal thing here. So this guy came on Bullet Ball and he started to share his sad story, which was like his wife had left them, he'd lost his job, he was living out of his van, but he was convinced that this was the thing and it was going to hit a break and he just needed to stay with it for a little while longer. Not going to work because he was unable to sit with the fact that it wasn't that big of a deal. And if he was willing to hang out there, then maybe he could start asking himself questions like, why isn't this that big of a deal? Oh, because there's a game exactly like this that is free. Okay, great. So what do I need to do about that? That whole branch of questions that would then allow him to get to whatever the actual innovation he's here to create on this planet was unavailable because he could not be with this notion that Bullet Ball was bunk. It was not the revolution. He was, I'm not willing to consider that possibility. Great, you're at its mercy. So this is why we end up doing the very thing we complain about. That friend of mine complained about other people's negativity because he couldn't even be with the idea. Let's one step back. You get, hopefully, that complaining about how negative people are is being negative, right? That's the same thing. He couldn't even consider that possibility and consequently had no access to see that. And so he couldn't be with it. And the work for him in all of this would be to actually notice, oh my God, I can't be with the negativity over there. And then to bring it home, be like, I can't be with my own negativity. And then sit in that. So I'm going to read the last two sections. Or actually, I'm going to stop reading. Excuse me. And I'm going to I'm going to talk about the distinction that's really at play here, which is we can be with something, but more often than not, we end up in one of two places, neither of which is the breakthrough of being with. The first place is we wallow in it. So these are the sort of people we wallow and we react to it, I should say. They're both reactive, but these are the places where my friend, he's complaining about these people, which is when we wallow in something, we dive in head first and it's like we're drowning in that thing. So we're just like, ah, fuck negativity. Like we're just a wash in it. We have no capacity to rise up above it. We just get pulled right back down into it. The other side of the equation is suppression. So suppression was my jam and always will be, right? That's the more common way that I learned to not be with something. We tend to have one of these two. So, what do we have here? Suppressing whatever is showing up is the most common way to avoid being with something. We can suppress ourselves by refusing to feel something altogether. I'm not angry. You know that when you're around someone, they're like, I'm not angry. And you're like, why do I have the distinct feeling that you're going to kill me with that pen? Why do I feel like that pen is coming through my eyeball? But you're insisting you're not angry. That's suppression at play. So we can suppress ourselves by refusing to feel something altogether. If you've ever met someone who told you they just don't get angry, sad, afraid, or any of these other inextricable parts of being a human, you can pretty much guarantee there is a degree of suppression going on for that person. It's important to note here that you may not even be conscious, and in fact probably aren't, that you are suppressing something. That's part of what makes it so effective. So it begins as suppression, the active role of doing this, and then later it becomes repression, which is where it's unconscious. It doesn't occur to us like we are actively getting angry and then stuffing it down. Once we've practiced suppressing something long enough, it becomes automatic. We no longer have to take a conscious role in doing so. As soon as the stimulus of anger, sadness, a low amount of money in my bank account, whatever shows up, we unconsciously and automatically react by stuffing it down. So if suppression grants us the ability to operate over top of something, then wallowing in whatever is showing up is the act of making it real and meaningful. It's not simply that someone in the country on the other side of the world is doing something cruel. It's that we must mount a campaign to do something about it. We must stay up late at night worrying about it. We must shift every conversation that we're in towards this important topic and rally everyone else to the same cause until we get the next cause. And so from suppression, it's like nothing impacts me at all, and there is no meaning to any feeling I have. The reciprocal to that, the other side of the equation, is that these things have incredible meaning. Our meaning is totally attached to this thing. And so from that, we have a huge reaction. And so, hey, Jennifer Lovely. And so everything on either side of this prevents the ability to simply be with it. To be with something means that we are able to just sit without any reaction, not by suppressing it. So the funny thing is that on either sides of this sort of like false polarity, this false binary set of choices, the people on either side look to the other side and are like, well, that's the wrong thing to do. So people like me who are actively suppressing their anger look to people that get washed away by their anger and just spit fire at people in cars and go, look at that loser. I'm not like that, and I'm not willing to go like that. And what that does is it keeps us over in the suppression side rather than learning to be with the fact that we have anger and it shows up. And the people over here on this side who get washed away, who are rife with anxiety or just overwhelmed by their emotions, look to people like me on the other side and think, boy, I don't want to be a heartless robot like that guy. That guy's sociopathic. He's just not in touch with his feelings. And that has us, because we have them like, these are my two choices, we hang out. Going to the other side is not the practice in being with. The practice in being with is a practice in equanimity. It's a practice in being able to sit with something, allow ourselves to feel whatever shows up, and be with that feeling without needing to do anything different. So for me, that would be like sitting here and letting myself get angered by whoever is angering me at the moment. Trump angered me a lot towards the end of his presidency. And so rather than shut out the conversation about them, rather than just cut that out completely, if I was practicing being with my anger, when that stuff showed up, I might just notice like, oh, I'm really angry, and let myself feel angry. I don't have to stuff it down. I also don't have to react to it. I don't have to run off and start a rally or go and protest. I have access to that choice, but I'm not dictated by my anger to make that choice, which is the other side of the equation, where someone is so, their emotions or whatever it is they can't be with is so real, they have no choice but to react to it. And so for these people, it's not about just don't feel anger. It's like, yeah, feel your anger. And now can you sit without doing anything to shift it? Can you allow yourself to be with the anger? And this is where the transcendence lies. So when we create practices around being with something, this is really what we're talking about. And the reason this is such a challenging thing for people is because we tend to only see the other direction in the wagon rut. So if I've been going forward all my life in this wagon rut, then I'm going to be like, oh, okay, got it. Suppressing this is not the way to go. I'm just going to sob uncontrollably. Ha, breakthrough. It's actually just the same direction in the wagon rut, and it limits your possibilities to one of two choices. What have you people written here? Evan says, perhaps sometimes you need to wallow in something a little bit to feel beyond it. So, of course, Evan, you're right. There's always nuance to all of this. The trouble is that if we start to bring nuance at the point where we're just creating an initial distinction, it gives the survival mechanism, it gives our ego a place to like, oh, who I've been is wallowing. And so now sometimes I need to wallow a little bit, and then you can go back there. And so I'm using very blunt force. Part of the power of a distinction is it like forces you to choose one side or the other. Is this what you want or what you think you want? Well, maybe it's a bit of both. No. Choose one of those two. It forces you down a path. And that's actually part of the power of a distinction. Having said that, I want to be clear that there's always nuance, which is why my job, I believe, will never be replaced by a computer, because that would reduce everything down to a set of binary choices, and it would remove the flexibility, the discretion, the randomness that is humanity. Tommy, suppressing anger was me in distinguished sharing at the beginning of the program. Would you be willing to share a little bit more of that in the comments, Tommy? Because I remember this very clearly, and I remember precisely what our friend Jody said to you, but I want to honor your experience. And so if you would be willing to share just sort of that moment, whatever it was for you when this was kind of reflected to you. But I know exactly what you're referring to, and I love that you're bringing that forward. Evan says, learning the Vipassana meditation practice taught me what equanimity actually looks like. Non-reaction, observation, curiosity, then realizing that all of it is just coming and going constantly. A healthy detachment. Right. And then just to play in how the nuance can catch us, right? For me, because my off-ramp is often suppression, it's very easy to get into a meditative state such that I can spiritually bypass what I'm actually feeling. So like, oh, it's all, you see this a lot in three principles communities where people have been run by their feelings all their lives. And now they have access to this idea like, oh, it's just my thinking. And so I can just change my thinking and then I don't have to feel bad. And then that allows them to go to the other side. Oh, I never have to feel bad, which is fine, except that becomes the new strategy. And it, instead of it like I never have to, it becomes I'm never able to feel bad because I don't have to. So why would I ever choose that? And it's like, yeah, but the distinction here is you can't choose it. You've actually used this to go all the way to the other side of not being with it. The true leader is able to feel bad when that's what's called for. And you might ask, well, when would that be called for? And I would say, I don't know. You tell me. Maybe when someone's dog died and actually what they need is someone else to feel the grief and pain that they're feeling. Or maybe when your dog died and it's a grim conversation we're in, but like you need to really get present to like, whew, I can really feel that. Lori, you're not a life coach, but you do feel drawn here, and I always learn something of value. Thanks for being here. I want to be clear. I love that you said that because it lets me say this is not a conversation really about coaching beyond what I would call the way of being that a coach is trying to create in themselves. And I would hold that that way of being is not coaching or like a thing they do as a professional. It's that quality of being is simply the ability to be with life. That's what leadership and coaching ultimately are about, is like, how open-hearted can I be, and how much can I be with whatever is showing up? And the beautiful thing about that is, as people get more and more able to be with more, they almost naturally become coachy or coach-like. Not because they're trying to get someone somewhere, but precisely because they don't need to get someone anywhere. You could show up with them and be like, I'm mad at myself. And they would just be like, I really get that. I can totally appreciate that. And they don't need you to change. And that creates something magical and miraculous, because then we get the gift of fully seeing and being with ourselves in that moment, rather than being with ourselves and whatever they're putting into the space. So, Lori, I applaud you for, one, acknowledging, hey, I'm not a life coach, two, for being here anyhow, and three, for the fact that just by virtue of showing up in a conversation like this, you're actually creating the being that a good coach ought to seek. So I say, some good words there. Ought to seek. As an attorney, you're taught, never tell the judge what they should do, because that the judge is the arbiter of justice and decides, they are very sovereign in their role. And a judge holds that, both that privilege and that power and that responsibility very highly. And so for a lawyer to come into the courtroom and then be like, you should make this decision, the judge will, how dare you, right? But there's just a workaround to it, which is, lawyers will then say, the court ought to decide this way, which is just a fancy way to say should. It's kind of funny. Anyhow. Evan, so you're saying it's a process of feeling it fully. Yes, reaction is the choice. Not the feeling, or not, sorry, I'm going to grab your distinction here. Not feeling all of it or not feeling any of it. And your experience with meditation is feel more, not less. I love that. That's beautiful. LA as well, also saying not a life coach either, but gained so much insight into myself and others around me. That warms my heart to hear. Oh, Jessica, I'm delighted to hear you say that. So Jessica just sharing she saw me via, I'm going to talk about Kit and Rosie and their manifestation bathtub. And thanks for listening to the podcast, Jess. I really appreciate that. It's awesome. And Vera, always great to have you here, Vera. Super stoked to hear that that's exactly what you needed to hear. And thank you, America. I try to be funny. My wit is something I delight in. So I'm going to come to what you wrote in a sec, Tommy, because I know it's going to be great. The manifestation bathtub that Jessica is referring to is Kit Tin Volcano, or maybe it's just Kit Volcano, I think is what he goes by, who I think I saw somewhere that he is transgender, I believe. I hope I'm not offending anyone, but I believe that's the case. And then his partner, Rosie, do a lot of work in the coaching sphere. They're up to some really cool stuff. They're very distinct individuals, totally, like, in some ways really loud, but very delightful. And they do a thing called the manifestation bathtub, where they and their guest get in a bathtub, not all the same bathtub, although I wouldn't be surprised if they created that, but get into a bathtub together and then do a Zoom. And so I did a Zoom with them where I was in my hot tub and they were in their bathtub, and then we just chatted about this sort of stuff, about coaching, about leadership, about what it is to live fully expressed, and all of that stuff. So check that out. It's on my profile if you haven't seen it. Tommy, you wrote, anger was the first thing all of the mentor coaches spotted in your being while sharing. So what Tommy's referring to is right at the start of the program, he got up and started to share about himself. And the first thing everyone was present to was his anger. And Tommy says, it's what I denied. I felt I was over most of it. And when they reflected this to him, he says, it made me angry to hear that I was angry. And what he didn't see was how much more he had tamped down. He'd gotten past the top of it, thus causing him to not see the part that was packed down. So it's like his anger had been all packed down, and then he had like some loose soil, which he'd kind of excavated out and then was operating over top of it. So Tommy, here's what I recall is that you were sharing at the front of the room, and you were Let me check, Tommy. Do I have your permission to share this? I want to make sure that I'm not just assuming something. I believe I do, given what you've shared, but just give me a yeah, go ahead so that I can share that. I think it's such a cool story, and I really love that you're sharing it because it's such a beautiful example of how this works. I'm gonna read a little bit of what I've got here about this part, make sure I didn't miss anything while I wait for Tommy's response. Mm. So just to finish up this part on being with something, the thing I said here is, oh, hold on. Yeah. So the thing at the end is whatever you are practicing being with throughout this book or whatever, you can always begin your practice by first noticing how you avoid being with that particular thing. Before we can stop doing something, we have to start seeing ourselves doing that thing. And so before we can stop avoiding being with something, we have to notice the ways we avoid being with it. And before we can even stop that, we have to come to terms with the fact that we're doing it. We have to be willing to come to like, okay, I'm willing to admit that I might be avoiding being with something. Now, how can I spot that? Those are kind of the steps. First, we have to almost come to like a surrender in a way. Ah, fuck, maybe I am angry. Then we have to start noticing how we suppress that anger. Then we can start stopping suppressing it so that then we can actually be with it. That first one, that insistence that we're not doing or not that thing, is usually where most people get stymied, including myself. Awesome. Thank you, Tommy. So Tommy was doing this work at the front of the room at the start of this long coach training program. And he was sharing about who he was. And the intention here is to give people insight into who they truly are, as well as all of the stuff they're putting in the way of that. And none of what we are putting in the way of who we truly are is conscious at this point in our lives. Like once you're 12, 13, whatever, very little of this stuff is conscious. And once you're into your 20s or even your 30s, you're far beyond it being conscious. It's well-worn, automatic, this is the way I am territory. And so Tommy was just sharing about his life. That's the context for the conversation. And Tommy was just sharing about his life at the front of the room. And what I remember was him saying, I used to have a lot of anger, but I've worked through all of that, and I'm not really that angry anymore. And the woman that was working with him at that point, while Tommy was saying this, just laughed and went, no, you haven't. And just let out this sort of burst of laughter at this idea that Tommy had worked through all of his anger and didn't have any of it. And now, to be clear, we would probably be a little more gentle in coaching, but that was a very pointed, intentional practice where the container had been set up very powerfully, blah, blah, blah. But it was, Tommy, thank you for sharing this because it's just such a beautiful example of like, Tommy just couldn't see it. You know, like it's not like he was like, oh, yeah, I'm angry, but I'm going to lie about it. It was literally invisible. And that is the nature of all of our blind spots. It's literally, we are literally blind to it. We literally cannot see it, which is why it's so frustrating when I wasn't sure if my lights were on. They seem a little dark. Why it's so frustrating when people are like, oh, you're doing that thing. And we're like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? I don't do that thing. That's not the way I am. You're relating to it that way, but it's not blah, 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 you know, all of that stuff. Let's get these lights a little brighter in this room. There we go. Oh, hey, Andrea. Nice to have you with us. Andrea says, I remember that moment, how exhausting it is to be performing all the time, avoiding being myself so long that I didn't really comprehend there was a me underneath. One of the things that's interesting when you start to practice being with something is it will initially take more energy than continuing to do your old pattern. And the reason for that is anytime you practice doing something outside of what you already know to do, outside of what's already comfortable or well-worn territory for you, anytime you do something beyond that, it's going to initially require more energy. It's going to demand more from you. What is simple and familiar and easy is whatever is simple and familiar and easy. It's whatever we've done. So if I've learned, well, I'll use squash as an example. So a correct stroke in squash, you lead, it's like skipping a rock. So you lead first with your elbow, your wrist is cocked, and then as you come right in a line with the ball, you snap your racket through and then whip it. So it looks like that. So I'm holding my hand all cocked back. I come through, smack. But when I first started learning to play, I played squash when I was in my first degree, but no training. And I just like a dude who liked to run around the court and bounce off the walls and stuff like that. And then I was like, this sport rules and I want to not suck at it. I want to get better. And I don't seem to be doing that myself. And what I had learned to swing my racket was just to hold my hand like one big lever. So I was just swinging like this. There was no bending or anything like that. And consequently, to generate power, I didn't. This stroke is powerful because it's like a whip. Your hand becomes a whip, and so your elbow travels at one speed, but then you're whipping the end of the racket through. So you can crack that ball at like 100 miles per hour. The pros are hitting these balls. It's insane how fast they hit them. And might I add, it fucking hurts when you get hit in the ass with one of these balls, which has happened plenty to me. Anyhow, I came out swinging like this. And so consequently, I, first of all, cleared the area around me. I was quite dangerous around opponents. And if the ball was in tight against any of the walls, I couldn't hit it. I would smash that racket against the wall. And finally, I couldn't really generate much power. This is a much less efficient lever than to swing like that. And so to learn how to do this differently, I had to like, it felt so incredibly awkward. It felt uncomfortable. It felt stupid because this is what was natural to me. This was the swing that I had learned. I had perfected this. I had made this inefficient swing as efficiently as I could. And you'll see this at various levels in the game. Like you'll get the rankings in squash go D, B, C, A. That's where I was playing when I finished. And then open and then PSA. Open is sort of like the highest level. And then PSA is the Professional Squash Association. These are the professionals that tour around the world and like are ranked, top 1, 10, whatever in the world. So you'd see at these levels people that had perfected an inefficient stroke, meaning it was not the optimal stroke, but they had gotten it as far as they could. And so you'd have people that would swing like this, like a tennis player would swing. Tennis is much more, you're not swinging with your elbow like that, like you would in squash, because the racket's heavier and the ball's heavier and all of that stuff. So they would master a tennis stroke and they would be really good and hard to beat. But they were also limited by how far they could go because this stroke in and of itself was suboptimal. Is everyone following so far? Because now I'm going to come to the point. I just wanted to talk a bunch about squash because it's an awesome sport and I don't get to play it anymore because I have a bad back and it's hard on my knees and all that. Are there any squash players here? Is there anyone that's played squash and thinks it's a friggin' amazing sport? I say that squash is like, if you want to play just, well, first of all, energetically speaking, squash consumes more calories than any sport with the possible exception of boxing. They're the two most calorically intensive sports because you're basically doing shuttle runs back and forth across the court. It's just incredible and it's so fun. And the thing that's really cool about squash is, unlike a lot of like racquetball, the better you get, the shorter the rallies become because you just get to the point where you can kill the ball so effectively that rallies become less and less and less in time. Squash is the opposite. The better you get, the longer the rallies come. They get longer and longer because you can track that ball down and you can hit a safer and safer shot, which then requires your opponent to hit a safer and safer shot. And so the game becomes very physically taxing and it starts to become very strategic. You get very cagey trying to like, how do I force an advantage and build this rally to the point where I can put it away? So it's a very cool sport, amazing sport, so good. Wow. Doing a live and talking is one of the most energetically, anyhow, getting out of breath. So the point here is shifting from this crappy swing that I'd learned to this swing that was practiced and proper and optimal for hitting a squash ball demanded more energy at first. It required more thinking on my part. It felt less familiar. It felt more awkward and uncomfortable. And it tired me out because I was not used to swinging my arm this way. I was used to swinging my arm this way. So all of the muscles that I used to play squash were at this point adapted to this stroke rather than to this stroke, which would have been a better stroke. And so consequently, it's very frustrating to learn. And I often at times felt like, what the fuck am I even doing? And I will admit there were times when I would just be on a court by myself practicing because I was committed to learning, and just like banging away at the ball, hitting it as hard as I could, and like just furious, just angry at the process of growth. I was frustrated. It was annoying. Fuck you, ball. Fuck you, racket. Why can't I do this? So everything I've just described is a metaphor for the work of becoming more fully expressed. The optimal, if we even want to use that word, but like optimal meaning like most natural, most efficient, the approach or the way that requires the least amount of energy from you is in alignment with who you already are. So if who you be is brilliance and wit and connection, then what is optimal, what is easiest, what is most effective as far as you being in the world is for you to just naturally allow the brilliance, connection, and wit that you are to be expressed. Instead, what we've all learned to do is create these sort of squash strokes in terms of how we be in the world. So maybe around certain people, I dim my intellect. I work to ensure I don't occur too smart because I'm worried about how that's going to show up around them. And then around other people, I might work to be really, really funny and to prove that I'm funny, which is going above and beyond what would just be to just be naturally, just be the natural witty self that America is acknowledging me for being. And so what we're doing is we're slowly in this work and really in this conversation we're helping you go back to what is innate for you. The trouble is that you've learned all of these approaches and then practiced them and in a way perfected them that are out of alignment with what is true to you. And so coming back home, so to speak, requires energy. It feels awkward and weird and uncomfortable. And at first it won't feel authentic because what feels authentic is the swing that you learned. We can't see any of it because all that we can see from inside ourselves is no, it's not a squash string. It's not something objective like that. I get that metaphor, Adam. That metaphor is great. I loved it. I'm going to go and share that with my people. Thank you for that metaphor. But this, maybe you don't sound this way, but I'm going to make you sound this way. But Adam, seriously, this is different because this is true and I trust my intuition and blah, blah, blah. And all of that is the sound of us hanging on to what we know rather than leaning into the possibility of what could be. It's tough. Tough to let go of this stuff. Tommy, again, with awesome sharing here. Thank you, Tommy, for being so generous and sharing this. Says, so he started his work in January. That was when Tommy began training. And it took until May or June with another leader of this work, Christopher, a man who made a big difference in my life, for Tommy to begin to see and acknowledge his anger. So it took him 6 months to kind of like let go of the insistence that he had dealt with his anger, let go of the idea that he didn't have any anger left, and then to slowly start to see how he was hiding it from himself, so to speak, and then to actually start noticing it and then to start working with it. 6 months. That's why coaching, I think, at its finest, works with longer commitments or within a commitment at least. Because as you're learning this stuff, it takes time. And as you start to unfold some of it, you're going to be like, this is garbage. I want to go back to what I know. And that's when, like, if you're just going session by session, there's going to be a point where you're like, it's not working. I'm good. It was the commitment that allowed Tommy to go through all 6 months. Really awesome work, Tommy. And it's cool to be with you because there's so much less. You know, I didn't get to acknowledge you. I was doing some speaking for the ICF chapter that Tommy is one of the leaders of, and he brought me in to speak on creating clients and stuff. And I didn't get to acknowledge you, Tommy, but there's just so much less proving yourself. There's so much less like kind of needing to make yourself significant and so much less anger in your space. And with all of that gone, I get to be present to like just the love and the like the real stand for possibility and love and unity that you are. So it's just so cool to get to be with that. Last thing I'm going to say on this piece, and then we're going to shift to a new topic, is that people who carry with them, what up, Sanyika? Good to have you with us, man. Everyone, if you don't follow Sanyika, make sure you do after this. This man is doing amazing things. He's just launched a TV show. Remind us what it's called, Sanyika. I know you're probably going to jump off pretty quick, but is it called the All-In Method? Is that what you called it? Whatever it is, it's amazing. He's up to awesome stuff. I love the content Sanyika posts, and I am glad that you are doing your work in the world, brother. You make me feel good every time I see what you're up to. So to finish what I was saying, those that bring with them the gift or quality or way of being that I would call unity, That's that quality that when they're in the room, there's this greater experience of unity. Like we are all in this collective nature, this feeling that even though I'm a Republican and I'm a Democrat, by the way, or I would be quite left leaning, but even though I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat and you're a centrist and you're a libertarian and whatever, or like I believe this is how things should happen and you believe that, the quality of being that is unity creates a clearing in which we almost all are like, that falls away and we just be with each other. So you may have been around people like this, or you may know or understand the kind of experience I'm talking about. And people that have this gift as part of what they bring to the world often have breakdowns in terms of their relationship with anger. They often have a great deal of anger that is suppressed in service of trying to be the unity that they are trying so hard to prove they are. And the hard part to walk all the way back home is first to own, oh, fuck, I got a shitload of anger. I'm mad at people. And I use that anger, part of the impact of that anger is I kick them out of this circle of unity that we have. Fuck you. Unity for everyone, but not you because you believe this. Fuck off. And so it's a beautiful thing. People who are unity, often some of their work or a significant portion is great. Let's start with your anger. Let's talk about that first. Okay. Let's have a look here. What else? What other topics do we have? Some good ones. I want to talk about what David brought because I didn't talk about this last time, which was third practice. So David's asking, or he's asking about third stage of practice. Just a quick refresher. The 3 stages of practice are like a distinction I created, and the way they work is the first stage of practice is I am focused on you. I'm focused on the world out there and not rocking the boat. So all my attention goes to like, I don't want to do this because it might upset you, or I don't want to be too annoying or loud or whatever. All my focus is on managing the reaction out there, managing how other people receive me. So it's a, excuse me, I'm just going to burp loudly. It's a focus that goes in that direction outwards. First stage of leadership, all outwards. This stage, lots of censorship. I'm not going to speak my truth because that would be upsetting, and I don't know. And the lens we relate to the world through in terms of these 3 stages is the lens through which we expect the world to relate to us. So what that means is if someone does something that upsets me, I expect them to not do that, and I get upset when they break my expectation. I conduct my affairs so as not to upset you, and you owe me that same courtesy. So that's first stage. Second stage of practice is all focused here. So it's all about me. And all my attention is on what's real for me. What is there for me to say? What is my expression demand? And so at this stage, you often hear people say, fuck censoring myself. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm a truth teller, or all of those flavors of I am unwilling to contain myself for your comfort is second stage of leadership. It's worth mentioning here that when I talk about leadership, I'm really talking about leadership in terms of you being a leader in your life wherever you are. So it doesn't matter if this doesn't mean like, oh, you're at a position in a hierarchy for a company and you're a CEO. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the way you show up in your life, wherever you are in your life, whatever you're doing in your life, being leader about it. So at the second stage, me. This is my truth. If I'm in a meeting and the meeting's boring, I might be like, this meeting's boring and we should change the blah, 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 blah. And if I say something that upsets you, just like in the first stage, I relate to and expect the world around me to relate to me through this same stage. So I might say, I don't like your shirt. And that's what's true for me to say. And then you say, wow, that's really upsetting. I feel sad. And my response to that will be, well, that's not my business. You are responsible for how you feel. So I expect you to adopt the same second stage of practice that I'm operating in. Third stage is where our focus and attention, and indeed what we are committed to, is something greater than ourselves. It is something greater than necessarily your feelings, and is something greater than my feelings. And so from this stage of practice, questions like, is this going to upset someone? Or is this my truth to share, fall away? And instead, the conversation that people coming to life and to their leadership from this stage start to get into is, does this cause the impact I'm committed to having in the world? So if I'm committed to leaving people feeling better about themselves, and I could choose any, I could be like, I'm committed to building a tall building. I'm committed to whatever, it doesn't matter. But if I was committed to leaving people feeling better about themselves, then I would notice someone and I might ask the question, or I might have the experience, that shirt does not go with those pants. And then I might ask myself, okay, I could tell them that, and that would be my truth. That would be one approach. I could also not tell them so that I don't upset them. But instead of looking at either of those two conversations, the place I come from is, would this have the impact that I'm committed to having in service of leaving people feeling better? And when I say something, create a mess, then I can show up from that lens. So I can start to say things like, oh, I made a mess. And then from second stage of leadership, I might be like, well, fuck you. It's not my mess to clean up. Your business is your feelings, and that's no business of mine. But from the third stage, I might be like, well, hey, it sounds like my impact was I caused a mess. And the impact I'm committed to having is that I leave people feeling better than I found them. So what do I need to do from here to create that impact? None of these stages is better or worse. It's just that they give us a particular set of results, a particular experience of life. And I would assert that the third stage of leadership grants us access to creating a result that is greater than ourselves. The second stage of practice and the first stage tend not to. It's not that you couldn't, it's just that you're unlikely to. Amen, sister. You're with me, America. America. Do people nickname you America? Is that actually your name? Because that's a cool name. America. So now we've got that refresher. Those are the first, second, and third stages of leadership, and they show up everywhere. So now David's question, and I'm just going to read the whole question, and I'm going to noodle on it. We'll see where we end up. His question is, from a third stage of practice, how does it look when you and your partner, romantic partner, have a project together? Like, do you hold each other accountable? How do you provide feedback to each other? How does it look in terms of what's needed to work together towards a common vision? Especially, how do you be when things are in the way? Let's start just by talking about relationship through these three lenses, romantic relationship through these three lenses. Oh, before I do, since we're kind of refreshing this, it's important to say you can't leapfrog or just jump into the stage of practice that you like. You can't do that. That won't work. If you're in the first stage of practice, trying to jump to the third stage of practice because it seems better, it's going to get entwined and messed up, because at the first stage of practice, you're going to be like, well, you'll try to be like, oh, I'm not going to say this truth because I'm committed to people feeling better, but that's actually going to get wrapped up in that first stage of practice of never wanting to cause a mess. So you have to go to the second stage before you can then get to the third stage. Have to move through these. And the important part here is then we don't want to vilify people for wherever they are in these stages. It's not about this is better than this. Just like distinguishing the color indigo from cyan is not that indigo is better. It just allows us to talk about these two colors that otherwise we could only talk about the color blue. And that allows us to create different kinds of art. Because I can be like, I'd like indigo here and cyan there, versus if all I have is the distinction blue, I'd just be like, paint it blue. So that's the reason we're distinguishing this. So in romantic relationship, first of all, if I'm in a romantic relationship and I bump into something, I bump into some kind of like problem, like we're getting into friction together. Let's say that, so let's say that in this romantic relationship, I am the one that like, I want to be seen. And so when we go to parties, I am the life of the party. And the reciprocal to that is that my partner is the one who always hides themselves. They always make themselves small. And so at first, this is kind of cool because I'm like, wow, I love how my partner is okay not taking up space. I'm always doing it and kind of sometimes feels exhausting. And I'm worried that I'm taking up all the space. And then on the other side, my partner at first in this relationship is like, wow, I so appreciate how Adam can just own the spotlight. That's amazing. So at first, we love this reciprocal part about each other. But then over time, it's going to start to create friction, inevitably. And so that friction will get to the point where I start to be like, my fucking partner never takes the space and it's so annoying. And my partner is going to be in a conversation with herself that'll be like, my partner always takes up the space and there's never room for me to sit into it. And then we have that mirrored complaint. towards each other. So the first stage of practice in relationship here would be for me to sort of like, I'm not even interested in looking over here. I'm just going to hold like my partner, my partner should, what would it be? Well, the truth in this example is that actually the first and second stages kind of, they actually give you the same thing. It's just where your focus is on either you or the other person. So like on the first one, if I was practicing this in the first stage, I'd probably be like, wow, I'm just going to keep myself really small then. My partner feels like I always take up all the space, so I'm going to learn to shut myself down. I'm going to censor myself so that then she can take the space. And whether or not she does is another question entirely. The point is that I relate through that first stage to my partner as like my job is to show up in whatever way allows them to not feel triggered, upset, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm doing in the relationship through this lens is I'm suppressing a part, I'm turning a part of who I am down. In fact, I'm turning it off. Now, in this example I've given you, I would argue that where I've met my partner in the relationship is I've turned this part of me way up. I've turned myself all the way up. I'm taking up all the space. I have no choice but to take up the space. And so coming at it from first stage, my reaction is to turn it all the way down. From the second stage of relationship, I would maybe look at this and go like, well, what's true for me, what's real for me is that I want to take up the space. And so that's your job. You have to vie with me for that space. You've got to compete with me. You need to rise to the occasion. I am not going to censor myself for you or anyone. And that's how I am. And that's what I'm about. And so if my partner is also in the second stage of the relationship, then she might also rise and then we're competing with each other. We're both turned the volume way, way, way up. Or we might come up with solutions in this example, such as like we go to opposite ends of the party and then we both kind of create orbits around us and we're turned all the way up and we're loud and then we come back together at the end of the night and there's some degree of balance created. Or we fight with each other or we interrupt each other. You ever been around couples like that where they're fun, but they're also kind of like vying with each other. And then, you've noticed this, they start to like cut away at each other or undermine each other. So this is what tends to happen. I am undermining my partner because I am feeling that I'm not getting enough light and I'm not getting enough visibility. I'm not getting enough the space, the spotlight, whatever. And so because what I need, my needs and my truth is the highest authority, is the thing that I allow to dictate how I show up, cutting their legs out from under them is justified. That's what I needed in that moment. So both first and second stage practice are me thinking. They're either me in terms of like what is my truth, or they're me in terms of like what will ensure that you like me, what will ensure that you don't have your boat rocked. Or another way I guess we could put it is me or you. First stage is you, second stage is me. This third stage of practice in this relationship with this example, the thing that would dictate the person's actions would be that which is greater than the individual. And so in a romantic relationship, that would be like the relationship itself. The we, as therapists, sometimes they talk about me thinking versus we thinking. So what would best serve this relationship I'm in? What would grow us as a couple rather than what is my truth and I will abide solely by that? I want to be clear that this is not free or even easy to step into. And in fact, it's almost impossible to see this outside of a support from a third party. The reason for that is I'm in the swirl with my partner. So, and because we meet our reciprocal, my partner's going to point out, you always take up the space, Adam. And I'm going to point, you never take up the space. And then we're pointing at each other. Nothing grows from there. So the third stage practice might be to start asking questions like what would there be, what's the breakthrough that could be available in this relationship? What could really show up here for both of us? What would have us both feeling really sourced and nourished? What do I need in those moments when I'm feeling like I need to take up all the space? And what is my partner feeling in those moments? And then collectively, what are we feeling? And what would there be for us to take on that would actually have our relationship grow and thrive together rather than just putting the attention over here? This is about as far as I can take this conversation, absent specific examples. So, David, if you're watching this, thank you for the question. I really need specifics. Give us the opportunity to like look through a lens. Otherwise, we're working in the realm of concepts, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. It's the specifics that really let us get our feet on the ground, and then I can sort of help us look through these three lenses, and we can make it real. It gets the feet on the ground. Andrea, you say you remember this conversation with Don Miguel Ruiz, I think, his four agreements, and it's very similar to their response. Always be integrous with our word became, what is your intention in sharing that the shirt doesn't go with the pants? Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, Andrea. This is the reason she clicked on this today. Thank you. Great. Glad that we hit it. Um, always be in integrity with our word can feel very heavy until we get to the point where our game is actually about to stay in integrity or to get back to integrity. It's not about always keeping our word. It's about honoring our word. Meaning, if we aren't going to keep our word, we let those that will be impacted by it know. We tell them as soon as we know that we're not going to keep it, and we do whatever we need to do to clean up. And that brings us back into integrity. What that gives you access to is you don't have to do everything perfectly. There's the ability to give someone a promise and then later to be like, I realize I'm not going to be able to keep that. What do I need to do to clean it up? That opens possibility rather than making promises, these really shitty restrictive things that most of us relate to them as, where we're like, I only promise that which I'm certain I can create. What that gives us is a life, the life that we are certain we can create and nothing beyond it. And if you're here, it's hopefully because you're interested in creating a life beyond that which you already know you can create. So, yeah, I got that, Andrea. Yeah, I think I needed to hear it too. Concepts. Let me find a message someone sent me as an example of what I'm going to talk about here. So bring up Messenger. Uh-huh. And then where are you, my friend? This is someone random. I'm not really sure who they are or how they know me, and I'm not going to give their name. Oh, maybe I don't have it. I thought I did. Let's just check. There you are. So, yes. So this is someone who reached out to me, and thanks, America. Maybe they call you USA too, for short. Um, so let's lay the context, then I'll provide the example, and then we'll talk about it. So what most of us do, because it's safer, is we hang out, we make declarations, and the conversation we're in with ourselves internally, as well as with other people, is entirely in the realm of conceptual. And the reason for that is because concepts are safe. A concept is a degree, maybe multiple degrees, of removed from reality. For example, I had someone on this live for some live coaching. We're going to have a live coaching show next week with my dear friend Hans Phillips, who's an amazing man. Very intimidating to coach him. He's so great. But anyhow, I had someone on and we were coaching, and I asked her, "What do you want?" And she said, "I really want to." I can't remember if it was go exponential or 10x my life. So that's a concept at this point, right? Okay, cool. That sounds cool. That's a concept. There's no reality to that. There's nothing like, I want to 10x my life and here's what that looks like. And so what a lot of our conversation was, great, what does that mean? And then what she did was she described that in terms of more context or more concepts. So, oh, well, like regular growth, linear growth is kind of what most of us are doing. We're incrementally growing, but like exponential growth, like it would be where I wouldn't even recognize where I was tomorrow because it was exponential. I couldn't even see it from where I am. Great, but we're still in the realm of concepts. I understand the definition of this, but get on the court. Like, where in your life do you want to create an exponential result? What would that look like? And you'll find, both for yourself and other people, that if you ask these questions, they resist doing this. So we'll talk about it, and then we'll pull back up into the realm of the concept. So this person, I think this person was basically trying to like create business from me. That's the experience I had in this conversation. But yo, if you get into a conversation with me and you keep showing up, I will keep showing up with you too. I'm going to ask you questions that'll probably be uncomfortable for you because you're holding back something. You're not like being fully in integrity with me. And so me asking questions like this will be a little uncomfortable, but I'll stay in the conversation with you as long as you do. So this person asked me, how's coaching going throughout this wild year? And I said, about the same, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I see you work at Keller Williams. Do you know, I mentioned two people that have been my clients in the past there that I really love. And he said, no, I don't. I used to work there. And I was like, oh, got it. And he said, I actually own two businesses now, and left it at that. And so I responded like, well, why own one when you can own two, right? Have you considered opening a third business? And he responded, no. So I wrote, okay, I'm just playing with you. I'm just having a joke. And he said, I guess, didn't enjoy my joke, I'm guessing. And he said, I actually do want to open a nonprofit and change one of these businesses into a nonprofit. So I said, oh, what are the two businesses you run? And he said, working in the financial freedom part first. And then the second one is I speak on health and wellness. The other is that I teach people how to retire young. Both of them are aligned with coaching and health and wellness. And so I was curious, like, oh, you teach people how to retire young. Cool. Are you retired? And he said, no, working to do it by May. So at this point, notice that retirement's just a concept, right? Like we understand what that concept means, but there's no ground underneath it. It's the same as if I told you like, I want to be better, right? That's smoke. You can't grab a hold of better. I can't determine if you've moved towards better or not. I can't determine if this person's moving towards retired or not. It's just a concept. Indeed, my parents are retired, but what that concept means to them is that they no longer work the salaried job they used to work, and now they do something else. But if you look at their lives, those people work a lot. They're farming these days. I grew up on first 2.5 acres, and then we bought 5 acres of property with a beautiful house on it. That's where I grew up. Once they retired, they farmed it. So they farm, they create crafts, they put them on the stall at the end of the lane. They're blowing up with COVID. It's crazy. But in any event, so you could look at that and be like, well, that's not traditionally we have an idea of retirement, but in this conversation with this person, really retirement's just this word. It's a concept. We haven't distinguished what it means. So I'm like, oh, cool. Well, are you retired? He says, no, I'm working to do it by May. And so I wrote, cool. And then what? Once you've achieved that, like, what'll you do once you're retired? And he wrote, free my wife and myself. Again, concepts, right? Not wrong. It's okay to start at concepts, but I'm curious, not to coach him. I'm just curious. And I'm in a conversation with this guy, like, free yourself from what? So I wrote, he said, free myself. And I said, to do what? He said, well, then our parents, our home, build nonprofit, work on world peace. So I was like, okay, interesting. Tell me about that last bit. Tell me about world peace and how you want to contribute to that. And then he said, many ways, brother. And then asked, what are your goals? So this is fine. This is not, my intention is not to make this person wrong, right? It's totally fine how they're showing up. Rather, it's to illustrate how we create these concepts that we chain ourselves to, right? Like this person is creating a business and a way of living his life in service of something that I would assert, this is my experience, and I mean, if we dug deeper, I bet we would find this to be true. Doesn't mean it is, but I'd be willing to bet some good money. This person has no idea really what they want to do with retirement or even why. They just know, oh, retirement, free myself. And if what we're working towards is freeing ourselves from something, that almost by definition requires then that however we are currently living, we experience as though we were imprisoned by it. If this person was living like, there is not, this is not about me being better. There is not a conversation that I'm in about freeing myself because I do not have an experience of my life of being trapped by something. I do not have an experience in my career of being imprisoned. Further, I don't have a lot of conversation about retirement either because I feel like I kind of am retired. Like that can be a little bit fudgy, but like there is a point I'd like to reach where, we've set aside enough money that we could not do anything and the money would keep coming. But at least how I'm currently experiencing and relating to life, I don't have a desire to stop doing this. This is not effort that I have to generate to be in this conversation with you. That's the promise of retirement, right? Oh, if I could only get myself to this place where everything felt easy and I didn't have to struggle or grind through it. The reason we want to ask these sort of questions, the reason we want to get curious about this is to get people down from the realm of concept into what they really want in their life. There's another conversation you can also, just another example of this was when I was coaching someone named Tyler. If you go and check the back catalog, I guess, or the episodes that where we're doing live coaching, Tyler has a very successful company called Tyler's Coffee, the world's first acid proof or non-acidic or whatever coffee. Does great business, it's very successful. And when we shifted into the coaching part, I asked, what do you want? And he said, more money. Concept, right? What for? Why do you want more money? What is it that you want in your life? And really, how much more money? And he didn't really have any kind of answer to that. The reason he wanted was more freedom. Great. What does more freedom look like for you? And again, like our conversation kind of hung out there. And so these are examples of how, and now this is important to get so that you can get this as much about me and about you as it is about these two people I've mentioned. We hang out in these things that are concepts because that allows us to stay safe. If I declare that I'm committed to early retirement, there's never a point where you're going to be able to hold me to account for whether or not I am moving towards that. You can't because it's so vague. There's nothing to hold my feet to the fire. If you were to tell me I will have $600,000 in the bank by January 29th, 2023, now we've got some real clarity. We've got something that calls you forward, and we've got something that you may not achieve. We've got a yardstick. And that is vulnerable. That creates a degree of vulnerability because now I got to show up in my life. Now I'm on the court. I actually have to play the game instead of hanging out in the vagaries, the concepts that allow me to stay safe. This shows up everywhere. So often when I ask people, what do you see you might take on from here? So they've created a piece of awareness. Y'all like awareness, right? We're big fans of awareness. If I have the insight, everything will change. I want that insight. Let's have everything change. So in coaching, we typically have this conversation and then we are like, oh my God, I can see that I'm doing something different than I can see something that I couldn't see before. I have new awareness, new insight. The next step is great. What will you take on in service of that? And that's the part we don't like so much because that requires A, making a declaration, and B, actually like there's some work to that because then we have to think like, fuck, okay, what will I do? As opposed to just hanging out in the funness, the newness, the novelty of awareness. And so when faced with that, what we tend to do is we get into vague concepts. So we'll be like, okay, well, what I see to do this week is to create more love. I'm going to make sure that I get more love. And part of my work is to be that annoying gadfly that's like, great, how? Well, I'm going to be, okay, got it. Yeah, I'm going to be more loving with myself and with other people. And I think especially with my mom. Great, how? What will you do? What specifically will you do that will be a practice in service of this? The same is true for declaring a breakthrough. I want to create a breakthrough in intimacy. Great. What result will you have created that would be a reflection of you having created that breakthrough? Well, I don't know. I'll just feel more intimate. That's where when we exist and live in our concepts, the only measure of our success that we're left with is how we feel in the moment that you ask that question. So if you're like, oh, the breakthrough for me is going to be connection, or the breakthrough is early retirement, and we don't have any other measure, 2 months later, I'll ask you, hey, how's it going with your breakthrough or with the result you want to create? And you'll be like, oh, pretty good. Yeah. And then if you're feeling pretty good about it, you're going to look to the stuff that justifies feeling pretty good about it. And then if I ask you a week later, because your feelings fluctuate and you're now feeling pretty bad, you're like, not so good. And you're going to point to all the stuff that you're doing that's not moving you towards the concept of early retirement. And so the opportunity here, the real practice, is to start noticing when you're hanging out in the realm of the conceptual, when you're hanging out in that which is vague, a concept that makes complete sense. And that if someone said, what do you mean by this concept? You could give them a very clean, good, well-articulated definition to notice, oh shit, that's me being up in the stands of my life. That's me being at the blackboard drawing out theories and stuff like that, rather than getting real, right down on the ground, getting my feet on the ground and making declarations. And that's a little bit like when, even David's question is in the realm of concept, right? From a third stage of practice, how does it look when you and your partner have a project together? This is one of the things I do with coaches and leaders is oftentimes they'll bring like, I'd really like to not get so upset with people. Great. Where's an example in your life recently where you've gotten upset with people? I don't know. There's not that many I can think of. Okay, well, why are we talking about this? Well, it seems like a good thing for me to take on. Got it. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But let's take a look at the projects, which is to say the results you've declared you want to create for yourself, and let's see how those are going. And usually people look towards like those sort of vague conceptual things they want to do to be a better human being, because it's safer than really looking at the stuff over here that maybe isn't working so well, or maybe isn't really moving forward. And sometimes before any of that even happens, they just resist creating projects altogether, because then you can only hang out in this conversation and it feels really good and neat, but there's actually no movement forward in your life. Okay, that's what I think I want to say there. Yes, Andre, exactly. Insight without action or application. Got time for one more here. Let's see. Let's talk about Sachko's question. So Sachko says she says, what do people need to do when they're 100% committed and do anything they can think of, which includes having a coach, and still don't achieve the goal for months? So, there's so many ways I can answer this question. I'll answer it for like the person that's inside this, and then I'll answer it for anyone that's intending to support them. And you don't have to be a coach for that. Maybe you're a leader. Maybe you're their friend. Maybe you're their parent. Maybe they're your child, whatever. So the reason that most people struggle and tend not to be very good coaches is because of the fact that the human desire is that we want people to create the change that they want to create. If someone tells me like, hey, I really want to stop drinking so much, I get invested in them. I'm like, great, you should stop drinking so much. And so the first thing is like when someone's really 100% committed and I'm going to do anything and I'm going to hire a coach, all that stuff, it's important to realize like we tend to get invested in that. And then from our investment, we subtly apply pressure to them. The job of coach is to let go. Well, it's first to distinguish when you're attached to them achieving that goal. And then the second part is to let go of it. The only way you can do those things is to work with your own coach. Hoping to see your blind spot by yourself, remember, it's impossible. So that's why I, and hopefully you, if you're a coach, work with our own coaches. But like what most coaches not in their own work do is they start to work with this person and then they get invested. They're like, my value in this relationship is a function of this person achieving what they set out to achieve, which makes total sense, right? That's the way the world tends to be created. But coaching operates orthogonal to that. It's not even the same axes. It's a different axis altogether. And in coaching, the real work is to be with that person and be totally okay with them achieving 0 of their results. Because that's the only way that person is going to realize, or it's the only way they're going to come to the bankruptcy of what isn't working for them. So I would say that someone who's like 100% committed and is doing everything they can think of, including having a coach, Probably my guess would be that they're going to have to start doing things outside of what they think of. Maybe they have to start brainstorming. Maybe they have to go and ask for support from a friend. Maybe they have to do something that they're unwilling to consider because it's very scary. What we typically do is we're like, here's the result, way in the realm of possibility that I want to create. Now, in terms of the actions I'm willing to take, I'm only going to look in terms of what I'm already comfortable doing. I'm not going to do that thing over there, any of this stuff. I'm only going to do this. And then so consequently, they do what they are already willing to do. The actions they take are entirely in the realm of what's familiar and known and already predictable, hoping that's going to get them an unpredictable result, which it, of course, won't. And so that's what is predictably going to happen. Now, the work of coach is to love them as they do that, to give them all the space to allow them to like, I think it's really going to work, and then to have it not work, to support them, to get clear on like the declaration and are you moving towards it or not, and then to give them the space like to show up and be like, this isn't working, and be like, great, let's take a look. So what have you been doing? What do you notice? I notice it's not working. I've tried everything I can think of. Okay, great. So where do we look now? That's an infuriating question to get, but it's the only question that's going to move you forward. And it's a question that comes not from the coach needing you to get somewhere. It's a question that comes from the coach or leader truly being off the court and really trusting that you are able to create this of your own steam. What most people want in this situation, where they're like, I've done everything, I'm 100% committed, I've done everything I can think of, what they want is an answer. What I've done everything I can think of is code for is, so tell me the thing to do, which won't work. Because if you tell them the thing to do, they're either going to take it and do it and then maybe achieve a result. But then the next time they arrive at this same place, they're going to again have to go and get an answer and then reiterate. And so all you're really helping them to do is become dependent on other people, either you as coach, you as leader, or whoever else. Or you'll give them the answer and then they'll reject it and then just hang out there even more. My people do this all the time. The distinction I call this is Tim Watt dizzy cry. Tim Watt, here, I'll even write it out for you. Tim Watt dizzy cry. I think I added in some vowels there to make it easier to pronounce. But Tim Watt dizzy cry stands for tell me what to do so I can resist and resent you for it. So it's sort of like these people, my people, me, the way one of my earlier coaches described it when I was in my coach training program, she was like, the way you kind of showed up in our coach training program was you would ask questions, but how you were being was kind of like, can you explain what you just said to me differently so I can then explain to you why you're wrong? That's Tim Watt dizzy cry in action. So it's like, I've tried everything, give me the answer, and then someone will give me the answer, and then I'll explain why it won't work. And what that does is it allows me to continue wallowing in, it's not my fault. I've tried everything. It's just not meant to happen. Or the world is structured against me, or this industry is busted and you just can't do it. And then I end up being at the effect of my circumstances rather than at cause to create what I'm here to create. And so the trap is like we love teaching. We love giving an answer. Have you noticed if you write a single letter on your keyboard on social media, punch in a single letter, maybe, or like, what could you do to test this? You just write looking for advice and then hit enter. You're going to get a ton of advice. You don't even have to type that. You just be like, what would you do? Or just type something like, I'm having a hard time with blah. And you're going to get a buttload of advice because we love to give advice because it justifies what we are doing and it allows us to teach and it feels helpful. And so this whole, yeah, I can, Megan, I'll say that in one sec. This whole structure, it hooks us in, it draws us in because of that, how appealing it is to give advice. So Tim Watt dizzy cry is, here, I'll write it out. Tell me what to do so I can resist and resent you for it. Tell me the answer so I can then resist it or resent you for giving me an answer. Sounds batty, but it is so part of our structure. And the way that works is that It's very prevalent for brilliant people. Brilliant people, where they get stuck is either I already know all the answers or I don't know all the answers, so I will wait until I do. So a brilliant person would be like, oh, I have no problem not knowing. I am fully willing to admit when I don't know. Yes, but the thing is, you just stop and freeze until you do know, which is not the breakthrough. The breakthrough for brilliance is I don't know, and I will not let it stop me. I don't know, and so I'm going to have to move forward and be willing to fumble and fuck this up and look stupid. And that's what brilliant people do not want to do. We don't want to face the fear that we might be stupid from time to time because we've got so much judgment laden on this notion of stupidity. Stupidity is made up, first of all, but never mind that. It's a whole different conversation. And so from that place, someone who's brilliant will create a project, an unpredictable result, and then the first thing they're going to attempt to do is like all the stuff that they already know to do brilliantly. And then they're going to, once they've exhausted that, they'll then go to all the stuff they know they don't know, which is still in the realm of what they know. They'll do a bunch of research. Maybe I'll do a bunch of reading. It's still not working. And then from there, they're going to go all the way to this other side, which is like, I tried, I've looked, I've researched, I've done all the stuff. Can you give me the answer? So now they're hanging out in, I don't know, and I can't move forward until I do know. Do you have an answer? And it's so fucking tempting to give them the answer. It's so tempting, both because it would like get them off of this flailing that they're doing, and it would let you feel really good. And it will not free them in any way, shape, or form from this particular contraption. It keeps them locked in it perfectly, and it makes you, as their coach, leader, friend, or whatever, you collude with their cycle. And so what coach does is say, I'm not going to give you an answer in service of the breakthrough you're here to create, but I would love to support you to get clear for yourself what there might be to do next from here. And then hang out with them in the frustration that causes. And if you're one of my people, kind of the shitty anger that can show up from that. Fuck you, stupid. You're just trying to fuck with me or whatever. And we love them through that. And in doing so, they will eventually get to the point where they're like, just to be clear here, so what's happening is they're not creating any results, right? They're flailing around. They're either trying to do a fuck ton of research. They're doing what they already know to do. So they're doing a fuck ton of research and like trying what they already know, bumping into the fact that that's not creating any new result. And then they're going and hanging out and doing nothing while they don't know and waiting for someone to come and rescue them. And if we are unwilling to get off that and yet still hold them for their commitment, great. So what do you see you might need to do to honor your commitment? And to coach them, not to tell them what to do, but to help them discover something. Eventually, they're going to get to the point where they're like, fuck it, it's not working. And they're going to get fed up with their stuff. And that's the point where they'll start to take steps outside of what they already know to do. That's the point when they're just going to have to start doing something that feels dumb or that feels random, maybe. But can you see that, like, even doing something, imagine that I'm like, I need to figure out how to reach more people in my business. And I try all the stuff I know to do, which I imagine, I'm going to make this a really small example, but imagine all I know to do is like, well, I can write posts on Facebook, so I could do more of that, or I can start Instagram. And then maybe I have a third thing. I'm like, I haven't checked out Twitter yet, so I guess I could do that too. And then I try all that stuff, and then it doesn't work. It doesn't create anything new. And then I go, I don't know, Adam, do you have an answer to this problem? Eventually, if my support is willing to sit with me in this long enough, I'm going to get to the point where I'm fuck you. And that's usually the point where what happens is someone's like, fine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go throw an ice cream cone at 5 people. And if they're willing to actually do that, that's going to create something different. That's going to create maybe not the result that they want, but they're actually taking an action that's outside of the realm of what they already know. And then they're going to discover, well, throwing an ice cream cone didn't work. Great. Okay, what is something you could try outside of what you know or don't know to do, outside of what you know to do, that might be a little bit less violent than throwing ice cream cones at people? Well, okay, I guess I could like buy a rose and give it to 5 people. And so what they're doing is they're learning how to operate outside of the 2 poles that they have been stuck in all of their life. And so the answer to this whole question that Sachiko's asked, which is, what do people need to do when they're 100% committed and do anything they can think of, including having a coach, and still don't achieve their goal for months, It's to surrender to that fact. And it's to let, like, the thing we need to do is let them be there and not try to change it for them and not try to help them that way. And what they need to do is let go of the story. They've tried everything and they don't know what to do. That's where people that, and Sachiko, I know you have some of this, knowing you at Sachiko works with Bay and and so I think it's fair. I think she's all right with me sort of acknowledging this. You, Sachiko, you get stuck off in here, right? I've tried everything and I don't know. And so if the question is like, what do I need to do, Adam? The answer for you, Sachiko, would be to drop the story that you've tried everything you think of and that you don't know and that you now need an answer. If the only place that answer could be found was within, then you're going to have to like go deeper than I've tried everything and there's nothing I can think of beyond this. Where most of us stop is I don't know. There's usually a point when I'm working with someone, especially someone that's not worked with me for a while. So they're like maybe a new conversation, or maybe there's someone that's like, can we have a coaching conversation? I would just love some support. There's a point where we're exploring together, just asking questions. Oh, well, what do you think that's about? What is this? What's blah, 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 blah. There's a point we reach where they go, huh, that's a good question. I don't know. And then they're waiting for me to then ask the next question. Oh, you don't know, right? So we use I don't know as a thought terminating statement. It's like, oh, the inquiry is over. I don't know, so I guess that's that. And what I invite all of us to do, you especially if you're watching this, is to stop stopping at I don't know. What if I did know? Or, great, I've arrived at a place I haven't been yet. Because if I already knew, I would already have an answer. So now that I'm here, rather than stopping, what is the answer to that question? What might it be? And we have to be willing to venture, well, I don't know, I guess it might be this. We have to put something out there that might be wrong. Because if we don't know, we don't have any way of knowing yet if it's right or wrong. And so we have to get courageous. We have to start to put ourselves forward and lean into that a little bit. Maybe I don't need to know. If that wasn't a requirement to answering this question, well, then what might it be? Okay, I bet I can hit one more of these. You guys have been awfully quiet right now. Is this making sense? Is this landing? Are you enjoying this? Do you still think I'm cool? Don't answer that. Don't answer. I'm going to hit Sherifat's question to finish us up, which is when and how do you know that you are good to start creating art? The answer is today, right now. There's no requirement in anything in terms of creating your art. Your art is whatever there is for you to express exactly as you are right now. The hard part is that we put like, oh, there's a place I need to be, or there's a thing I need to know, or there's some experience I need to have had before I can start expressing myself in whatever medium I'm choosing to express myself. I will share with you that every morning I make this tea, and then I sit down in this chair, and I look at that button that says go live. There's a part of me that's like, oh, you need to prepare more. You need to do more. Oh, hey, Miles, nice to have you with us, man. There's more that I need to think about. I need to come up with better questions. And every single time that voice shows up, I go, just hit live, Adam, just hit live. I go live before I'm ready. That's how art is created, is you go before you're ready. You stop waiting for knowing or expertise or credibility or whatever you are putting in the way of expressing your art. And hopefully you also commit to improving yourself in your art. Because if all you do is like, I'm just going to express myself and I'm not going to put anything into improving my art, that's fine. The world will probably start to get bored of that over time. We are excited by people that are growing, that are moving. We like music that isn't just C held down. Check out this new song. It's middle C. It's the motion, it's the progression in music that's exciting to us. So in expressing your art, you and others receiving your art, we want to see progression. So hopefully in whatever kind of art you're putting into the world, you're also getting supported to grow into it. But that is in no way a requirement or a prerequisite to putting your art into the world. That starts the moment you hit go live, or the moment you hit broadcast, or the moment you show someone your notebook of poetry, the moment you publish it. We can all journal by ourselves. And this is not to denigrate journaling, which I think is a great practice. But art becomes art when it is shared. That is when it goes from something personal and hidden and safe to something vulnerable and courageous and generous. I'm channeling a bit of Seth Godin here. You can argue that art is something different, and that's fine. I'm creating a distinction for Sharafat's question, which is the art we're talking about here is courageous and generous, and it is shared. And so the moment you let someone else in, the moment you say, check this out, that's the moment that art is created. And you don't have to wait one moment for that. Start doing it today. It will set you free. That's the beginning of all this. I'll give you one last example of something. It's kind of a weird example of this, but like it is an example I'm holding as sort of a piece of art, which was this is really a story about me expressing the art of Adam Quiney, like just the art of who I be in the world. This was before any coaching, any work that I'd done, but I still was a personal development junkie. And I was like, I'm going to create a practice where for the next 30 days, I'm going to make eye contact. I was walking to and from my job in Vancouver, where I was living at the time. I was practicing law for the federal government's Department of Justice, their income tax branch. It's a fascinating area of law. You'd be surprised. It was really amazing. And the reason is that in income tax law, you're typically working with one of two sort of poles of people. One side is they're like friggin' mad geniuses who have a buttload of money and have figured out how to how to outrun or outpace or cheat or like just escape the tax code. And they've created these mechanisms, and you're like, how do I even create an argument to attack this? We call it attacking. How do I mount a legal argument to attack this? And then the other end of the spectrum that you're dealing with are people that are untethered from reality. They believe that if they sign their name with an infinity symbol and call themselves a freeman of the land, you can research this stuff, and like refuse to acknowledge the judge when the judge calls them by their name, that then makes it so the court has no jurisdiction over them, which then means they don't have to pay taxes. And so these people are so unhinged. It's a lot like QAnon sort of stuff, this level of conspiracy minded thinking. And so they're so unhinged from reality that you're like, their argument is so bad, it's not even wrong. Like, how do I even argue this? It's so weird. So anyhow, really, yeah, Megan, you probably have had some interaction with these people. It's fascinating. There's a judge in, I can't remember, I think it was a Court of Appeals judge in Alberta who wrote a long opinion on this, basically detailing their argument and then how it was wrong. The reason being that they kept showing up in his court, and he was like, it's so clearly wrong, but I'm noticing that it's so far out there that it's hard for people to have an effective legal argument, and that's getting it's like chaff getting in the way of the wheels of the justice system. We're spending our time on this nonsense rather than the stuff that actually matters. So anyhow, fascinating area of law. I was walking from where I was living to the Department of Justice every morning and walking home every night. And the practice I created was every time I pass someone, I'm going to make eye contact with them. Not aggressive, intense eye contact. I'm just going to look at their eyes. And if they look at my eyes, I'm going to hold that eye contact for a moment before I look away. So nothing offensive or intrusive. You can be kind of penetrative with this. That's not what I was doing. Although I may have occurred that way a couple times because I was practicing something new. But this is just a really simple example. Like there was no readiness to that. I didn't feel ready to share whatever people were going to see behind my eyes. And in fact, at this point in my life, I was very closed. I was probably at my most sophisticated in terms of my buttoning up. And so I'd walk by people and I would look at them and I would notice just a fleeting feeling of vulnerability when I would catch eyes with someone. That can be as much a part of you expressing your art as anything else. I invite you to go deeper than that, but if that's where you're currently practicing, great, practice that way. There's never a point when we're ready. The point happens when we go live, or when we look in their eyes, or when we do whatever it is. So do it. Take on that practice. Okay. Good live, if I do say so. What do I plug? Because I'm coming from Accomplishment Coaching's focus group, I really want to plug their work. They are amazing. They provided the initial foundation for the ontological model that I've created, evolved, and work with now. The spectrums of being was a great debt to them as a starting point, along with Landmark Forum and some other programs and and work that have all contributed to that. And what is beautiful about their work is that there is plenty of concepts available for people that are really brilliant, and their whole commitment is to take you from the realm of concept to the realm of manifestation, of embodiment. So, yes, it's cool that who you are is brilliance and unity and oneness. Now, how are you going to make that real in your life? What actions will you take? What projects will be a reflection of that? How can you get supported to create that? So, the people that leave that work leave transformed because they are actually being these things rather than thinking and talking about being these things. And that's my experience of most coach and leadership training programs is that people leave with their head replete with a bunch of concepts and words and sentences they can say to you and utter very clearly without any of it in their being. And so you have these conversations, and NLPs, well, I see this a lot in NLP communities where they can talk and like make all these gestures, but behind that, it's like I don't feel any depth of, you don't feel like you've got access to a depth of being. I don't feel like a deeper level of authenticity with you. I feel a deeper level of you talking about authenticity. And that's what distinguishes their work from, I would say, most of the work I see out there. So Accomplishment Coaching, highly recommend their work. Check them out on their website, accomplishmentcoaching.com. Their website's garbage, is my opinion, but they are taking steps to remedy that. And I really, if you do check them out, I invite you to look past the website to like whatever you are getting from being with me. Their work is amazing. And you can, the coolest thing is you can, I think, observe their work. So you can sit in for a couple of hours and just witness coaches going through transformational work and see how this actually plays out. It's so cool. Other things I want to promote or big up is this one is a promotion and a request. So the promotion is for the Creating Clients course, the plug, I guess, and that course is all about destroying the distinction that has been created, I would say, like in the world of what I love doing and the selling of what I love doing. And in that course, what we do is support you to shatter that, to transcend those two poles so that you don't have to ever do something in your life that feels grindy or awful or uncomfortable. There may be work to get to this point, but where you end up is like, oh, creating clients is just a natural expression of who I am. Kind of like that whole notion of retirement starts to fall away because what would there be to retire from? All I'm doing is being who I'm being in my life, and that creates prosperity in my work. So if that sounds cool, if you're interested in doing deeper work with me, check out here. I'll put the link in the chat. Right first, I'm going to put in accomplishmentcoaching.com. Check them out. Here's the link to the client creation course, which you should definitely check out. And the request is this: if you are affiliated with an ICF chapter in any way, the ICF is the International Coach Federation, global collective thing. My request is for you, and the reason. Oh, thanks, Tommy. So you can't do observation right now, which is too bad. But maybe once they go in person again, they'll allow that. Or maybe if we have enough people asking for it, they'll start to do it virtual, because that is possible. My request is this. First, I'm going to give you the context, and I'm going to share the request. So I am speaking to ICF chapters about this thing I see in the coaching profession, which is this separation of like the thing I love doing and selling. I'm not just doing it with coaching, I'm doing it in a lot of professions, but I'm really committed to elevating the coaching profession. The International Coach Federation, when I do this, says, well, that's about business, and so we are not going to offer what are called continuing coach education units. The point of this is that they're saying, they're drawing a distinction. The same fucking distinction I just talked about. So they're saying coaching's over here. Coaching is the thing that coaches, we train coaches, we're all about and they love doing, and selling coaching is over here and it's separate. No, that's the problem. So this context exists all the way, it's in the foundation of the very group and body of governance that holds the profession of coaching. I want to change that. I believe that at its highest, when we are truly embodying what this work teaches, the work I'm talking about here, that there is no distinction between coaching and selling, that all of the competencies a coach, all the ways of being a coach brings to the table are every bit as present and important when we're supporting a client to become a yes to us as they are when we are coaching someone. And that my part of my commitment and mission in this is to actually realign the ICF to create that breakthrough in the internal structure of the coaching organization that holds coaching. My request is that if you're affiliated with any of these chapters, or if you're affiliated with the ICF in any way, that you put me in touch with people, that you introduce me to people, that you say, yo, you got to talk to Adam so that I can continue to do this. And you and I and all coaches can get the benefit of this work, really having the depth that is available. Okay, soapbox concluded. That's part of what I'm up to. If that inspires you, put me in touch with someone like that. Let's have a final sip today before we head into the weekend. Just about done January. I hope you're having an amazing 2021 so far. And if you're not, I trust it's going to get better. Love all you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Peace. See you soon.